Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress. I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Thanks for tuning in. More truth from the book Codeword Barbelon, 666, Danger in the Vatican, The Sons of Loyola and Their Plans for World Domination by P.D. Stewart. Get it at luxverbi.org, luxverbi.org. Now, back to the book, Codeword Barbelon. Very important subject we've been talking about, the Vatican's role in the Revolutionary War to separate the colonies from Great Britain, to make a Vatican Jesuit enclave out of the United States of America. And in the end of our discussions yesterday, we were talking about the so-called intolerable acts passed by the British Parliament that outraged the colonists. And we've suggested that it was because the Jesuits had control of key people in the Parliament and even the British Crown that allowed these notorious, intolerable acts. The most significant of which was called the Quebec Act, which set aside land between the Ohio River Valley and the Mississippi River, a good portion of the Great Lakes region of the country, settled by Protestants in this new land, that it would be given to Canada, Catholic Canada. And that it even made Catholicism the official state religion of Canada. Imagine a Protestant parliament in Great Britain establishing Catholicism as the official religion of Canada. Why is this never talked about? Why was this not talked about in my history books in high school? You know, history was so boring in high school. Now I know why. It was literally stripped of all of its meaning. Anything significant that I could learn from it to help me make sense of what was going on in the world. History isn't just bland names and dates. It's a dynamic reflection of real goings-on in the world and motives behind historical events that is totally lacking to our understanding in America, particularly having to do with the formative years, the colonial years of our fledgling country. And it's just high time. And here we have a British historian, P.D. Stewart, informing us Americans what we should all know. This is outrageous. And P.D. Stewart is to be commended, and I do, and I highly recommend his book. Thank you for helping wake up America. Now let's just do our part to come fully awake to the information that P.D. Stewart gives us. We ended yesterday in our discussions of these intolerable acts and the activities of the Jesuits and the Freemasons of Great Britain in conjunction with their Illuminized, Jesuitized Freemasons here in the country to foment this Revolutionary War for a very specific purpose that benefits the papacy. Look, we have to understand that the overwhelming majority of the colonists were Protestants, fearful of Catholicism, were subject to papal persecution, slaughter, Inquisition, annihilation, and they fled to this country. And they didn't want Rome to have any part in this new country, understandably. That sentiment is completely lost in our country today. And we need to understand this early history, Rome's early history in the formative years of this country, so that we can understand what's going on in our government today. Now, we ended in our discussions about these intolerable acts, these things that drove a permanent wedge between the colonies and Protestant Great Britain, and the author suggests that the Jesuits and their Freemasons were working on both sides of the conflict, and then he gives us a quote from the Jesuit Oath. And if you've never read the Jesuit Oath, I suggest that you just Google the Extreme Oath of the Jesuits. Put that in your search engine, the Extreme Oath of the Jesuits, and read that oath over and over until you understand its mentality. Here is an excerpt from that oath. Speaking of the Jesuit complicity and orchestration of the Revolutionary War and her Jesuit agents both in the United States colonies and Britain. He says, "You have been taught to insidiously plant the seeds of jealousy and hatred between states that were at peace, and incite them to deeds of blood, involving them in war with each other, and to create revolutions and civil wars in communities, provinces, and countries that were independent and prosperous, and enjoying the blessings of peace." That's straight from the Jesuit Oath. Now, the Catholics absolutely deny that that's the oath of the Jesuits. Let them deny all they want. History verifies that they operate according to that oath. Now, if that oath is a fabrication, as say the staunch supporters of the Roman Catholic Church, why is it that the Jesuits use it as a recipe so carefully held to that oath, their actions speak louder than their oath? And if you heard the previous broadcast, Daryl Eberhardt, who is always quick with a quote and the title of a book, he suggested that you get a copy of The Secret History of the Jesuits by Edmund Paris. And when you read that book, you'll see that they have always operated according to the tenets of the oath that we say is genuine. Now, I'm not willing to concede to anybody that that oath is not just as genuine as I say it is. But let's just let them have it. Just let them have this idea that this oath is not the oath of the Jesuit order. Just study their history. Write their oath based on their activities in the world, and what do you get? Exactly what Rome denies is the official oath of the Jesuit order. They follow the recipe to a T. They cannot deny that that oath belongs to them. And I want my listeners to know it. Now, continuing where we left off yesterday, it says, in 1768, no less personage than Samuel Adams recognized this fact when he said, quote, "I did verily believe, as I do still, that much more is to be dreaded from the growth of popery in America than from the Stamp Act or any other act destructive of civil rights," unquote. Adams even suggested in the same speech that Rome had a hand in the Stamp Act. Quote, "Nay, I could not help fancying that the Stamp Act itself was contrived with a design only to inure the people to the habit of contemplating themselves as the slaves of men, and the transition thence to a subjection to Satan," which is a direct reference to Rome. He says, a transition thence to a subjection to Satan is mighty easy, unquote. That's from John Adams. And it says President John Adams is reported as having asked the papal admirer Thomas Jefferson the papal admirer Thomas Jefferson, quote, "Can free government possibly exist with the Roman Catholic religion?" Unquote. In 1775, all of these quote-unquote intolerable and bizarre acts by the British Crown conspired to transform this conflict into an important historical event. In response to the outcry against the Quebec situation, the Continental Congress of American Colonies sent troops to quote-unquote liberate Quebec from the Catholic control. But Colonel Brigadier General Benedict Arnold failed in his mission at the assault on the Sault-au-Matelot barriers in the winter of December 31st, 1775. Curiously, Arnold, although sent on a mission to recover Quebec from Catholic control, appointed a French Catholic priest from Quebec, Father Eustache Latbinière, as chaplain to the 1st Regiment January 26, 1776. In any event, General Benedict Arnold, having failed in his Quebec mission, the Continental Congress then sent a diplomatic mission to Canada to negotiate peace, the terms of peace. Included in that mission were Samuel Chase, Benjamin Franklin, an Illuminized Freemason. That means he was Jesuit-controlled, and the prominent Roman Catholic Charles Carroll. Charles Carroll, if you don't know anything about the history of Charles Carroll, you have to read about it. Huge personage. Lord Baltimore of Maryland, member of the Continental Congress, a rich, landed Irish Roman Catholic immigrant to this country, Jesuit trained in Europe, one of the most powerful and arguably the richest man in the colonies at the time of the Revolutionary War. He actually helped foment the Revolutionary War. He and his brother John, a Jesuit priest. And if you miss the research on John and Charles Carroll and their activities during the Revolutionary War, you can't comprehend the Revolutionary War or the colonial years. Their influence is just that big. Now it says, when Benjamin Franklin and Charles Carroll went to Montreal on behalf of Congress in April of 1776, they took with them Carroll's brother, a Jesuit priest. We're talking about John, the first Archbishop of the colonies. The aforementioned John Carroll, says the author, and it says, whoever seeks to explain the American reversal on the Catholic question. Now, what's he mean by the Catholic question? There was a serious question in colonial times. Do we want Catholicism in this country? Do we want to allow religious liberty to the Catholic religion when all throughout its history it has denied religious liberty to anyone else? That's the Catholic question that raged during the colonial period. He says, whoever seeks to explain the American reversal on the Catholic question must look at what happened in Quebec and the significant role played by the wily Jesuit priest, John Carroll. And I'll just add, this entire enclave that went up as representatives of the Continental Congress to negotiate terms with the Catholic government of Quebec. Now remember, when we read the book The Ark and the Dove by J. Moss Ives, a Roman Catholic book written for Roman Catholics by a Roman Catholic author, he told us about this diplomatic mission to Canada. And he laid it out that they were trying, hopefully, a long shot, but to get Canada, French Catholic Canada, to assist the colonies in their revolution against Britain. And because of so much Roman Catholic sentiment, anti-Roman Catholic sentiment, and because of the failed attempt of Benedict Arnold, they were afraid that possibly even Catholic Quebec might join Britain against the colonies. But this mission by this diplomatic team, all Roman Catholics, went to Canada and achieved at least a promise of neutrality from Quebec, Roman Catholic Quebec. Now, they wouldn't agree to assist the colonies, but they wouldn't attack the colonies either. And you have to ask yourself, out of all this, who really benefits? We're going to find out as we continue reading here. It says, the second mission, like the first, was a failure. However, it marked another important milestone in the turnaround of American opinion about Catholicism. For not long after, George Washington issued strict orders banning anti-Catholic sentiment and rhetoric, and a prohibition against Pope's Day celebrations was imposed to avoid offending Catholics. At the time, Pope's Day held in memory of the 1605 Jesuit-inspired plot to blow up the English Parliament. In the end, after attempts at peace over Quebec failed, the colonists went to war against the British Crown. Now, this is what is going to strain the water of a lot of people who are loyal to our quote-unquote founding fathers, particularly George Washington. We're going to get into a controversial area of discussion here having to do with George Washington. But the first indication that George Washington may have been influenced by Rome was that Washington knew he was going to have to lead this Revolutionary War, and he needed the assistance of Catholics. Catholics and Protestants were going to have to fight together and to have peace in the colonial army. He stopped the popular ceremony or celebration of what was known then as Pope's Day. And it was a commemoration of the successful discovery and prosecution of the gunpowder plot of 1605, a Jesuit attempt to blow up the British Parliament, the Protestant British Parliament, as a prelude to a military or naval invasion of England to forcibly restore Great Britain to the papacy, to destroy Protestantism in Great Britain. And they prosecuted the Jesuits who fomented that attempted dastardly deed and executed them. And the British celebrated that for a long time. They celebrated that victory over popery. And in the colonies, they called it Pope's Day. And what they did was they burnt effigies of the Pope. And Washington wouldn't allow that celebration to continue because it might inflame the sensitivities of the Roman Catholics who were hopefully going to fight side by side with the Protestant colonial army against England. And it is charged that George Washington was secretly Catholic. Some researchers suggest, and we're going to get into even more details about this, that our first president was Roman Catholic. Now, certainly we know he was a Freemason. Some argue that he wasn't a very good Freemason. He didn't go to the lodge, and he certainly wasn't Illuminized or Jesuitized. This is the debate that's raging, and I invite my listeners to investigate this from every angle. But I'm not going to get muddled down in this argument as to whether or not George Washington was an Illuminized Freemason. Because we've got bigger problems today. We've got enough information to let us know what is happening in this country today as it relates to our founding, to uncover what is about to happen in this country. It fully explains the Roman Catholic power in Congress and in the White House and in the Supreme Court, in all of our state governments. The Jesuit control of this government began at the Revolutionary period. That is inarguable. And we simply have to understand it. And that's what I'm here this morning to do, to help you understand the Vatican's role in the Revolutionary War. We'll continue right after these messages. You're listening to Inquisition Update on FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Have you seen the Left Behind movies? Have you read the Left Behind fictional book series? Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. Because they see the world stage shaping to fulfill what they have been led to believe is sound biblical interpretation, a left behind rapture scenario, this false view of prophecy is reinforced in the mind, not only of its adherents, but also includes those who have been merely exposed to the specific media. Is it possible that false prophecy can be fulfilled? The rapture theories have always been in dispute. Pre-trib, mid-trib, and post-trib disputes have risen up in exclusively evangelical circles of recent history, so that when true believers don't suddenly disappear, this element will easily go by the wayside when all see a new Jewish temple begin to be built. Will this be part of the great delusion that will come upon the whole earth? It seems that this great prophetic delusion has already overcome practically the entire American evangelical and Christian world. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. To learn more, visit crosstheborder.org. That's CROSS, crosstheborder.org.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on satellite, internet, or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the Internet. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Okay, welcome back to the second half of Inquisition Update on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. If you enjoy Inquisition Update, please support Inquisition Update by supporting FirstAmendmentRadio.com. We'll continue now with our attempt to understand the religious purposes behind the Revolutionary War. We're talking about this attempt of Samuel Chase, who I believe was Roman Catholic, Benjamin Franklin, an Illuminized Freemason, and Roman Catholic, I believe he'd have to be, because he took in negotiations to try to secure a hierarchical style government for the Roman Catholic Church in this country, soliciting the help of a French bishop, a French archbishop, in one of his missions to France. So he was negotiating for the Roman Catholic Church. I'd have to believe he was Roman Catholic to be so intimately involved in establishing a hierarchy for the Roman Catholic Church in the colonies. And certainly as an Illuminized Freemasonry, he was working for the Jesuits, and prominent Catholics, the Carroll brothers, Charles and Jesuit priest John. They went to Roman Catholic Quebec as the first attempt failed by Benedict Arnold to strip Rome's control over Quebec. This entourage went to Quebec to smooth things over and possibly even, by some miracle, get these Catholics in Quebec to support the Revolutionary War against Britain. But it failed, and it wasn't a total failure. At least they got Quebec to promise that they wouldn't attack the colonies on the side of Britain. And the book continues. He says, this second mission, like the first, was a failure. However, it marked another important milestone in the turnaround of American opinion about Catholicism. For not long after, George Washington issued strict orders banning anti-Catholic sentiment and rhetoric. All right, this most likely became the attitude at the time this mission was held to secure Roman Catholic support from Quebec for the Revolution. And the Catholics in Quebec were offended at the Protestant behavior, or in how they burned the Pope in effigy, and all of the laws in the colonies restricting activities of Roman Catholic priests, and laws throughout the colonies that would not allow Catholics to run for political office or serve the government in any way. And so President George Washington responded to this criticism from Quebec, and no doubt, obviously, to help persuade Quebec not to join Britain in the Revolution. He abolished Pope Day celebrations in the military. Okay? And it says, at the time, Pope's Day was held in memory of the 1605 Jesuit plot to blow up the English Parliament. In the end, after attempts at peace over Quebec failed, the colonists went to war against the British. Now, subtitled, Using War to the Church's Advantage, we're going to get into how the Vatican used this war. Now, she calls herself the church militant. The Roman Catholic Church is the war-fighting church of the world. I mean, all of this nonsense about Islam, there's a Jesuit priest behind every Muslim imam. It's Rome that's fomenting all this Islamophobia. I won't go into that. Let's stay focused on the book. We're talking about Rome's use of this Revolutionary War. P.D. Stewart says America's first Catholic bishop was a strong supporter of the American Revolution. John Carroll, the Jesuit priest, brother of Charles Carroll, firmly believed that a Catholic institution could make a major contribution to the political, cultural, and educational life of this fledgling nation, unquote. Once the war began, in order to dispel the deep-seated suspicion of the Protestants, the overwhelming sentiment in the colonies that the Catholic Church in America was no more than a tool of the Holy See, Bishop John Carroll encouraged Catholics to fight in the 1776 war for America's independence from Britain. This proved to be the major turning point in Catholic-Protestant relations. Okay? All of a sudden, we're going to have Catholics fighting right alongside Protestants against Britain. Now, the Protestants, obviously, are fighting the intolerable acts. The Catholics, however, are fighting Protestantism from Great Britain. You see the difference? But they're using this common cause to unite Protestantism and Catholicism over this war. How convenient. It says anti-Catholic sentiment greatly abated, especially when, according to Dr. John Pilch of Georgetown University, the Jesuit university, the first major university in this country, Americans noticed the, quote, the wholehearted participation of Catholics in the common struggle of war for independence, unquote. And the Jesuit priest John Carroll wrote to John Fenno of the Gazette, June 10th, 1789, quote, their blood, that is Roman Catholic blood, flowed as freely in proportion to their numbers to cement the fabric of independence as that of any of their fellow citizens. In other words, they bled just as much as the Protestants. Okay? And it says in the year 1776, the reader will no doubt recall, was the year in which Jesuit priest, professor of Roman Catholic canon law at Ingolstadt University in Bavaria, Jesuit priest Adam Weishaupt established the Illuminati, whose expressed aim was to overthrow of all established government. Why, you ask, would a Jesuit or zealous Catholic fight and die in a war on a side that he did not really support, when his true allegiance was with Rome? Because, as one Jesuit general put it, quote, we have men for martyrdom if they be required, unquote. Fighting and dying in the American Revolutionary War was a small price to pay for Rome's, I'll add the word, eventual advantage. But those advantages, as we've already seen, were early on, too. Broke down the hatred and animosity that the Protestants had for Catholics in the colonies because they fought side by side against England. They began to be seen as patriots, when in fact they didn't have any patriotism to Protestantism. They had patriotism to their Pope, just like they always do, and the Revolutionary War served the Vatican's purpose. They were fighting for the Pope. The Protestants were fighting against the intolerable acts of the British Parliament. The Protestants, so ignorant, still are today. They don't understand the wily, diabolical schemes of the Jesuits. Why? Because they don't study the history of the Jesuits. P.D. Stewart knows. And he's teaching me, and I hope he's teaching you in this book. What a mistake. We let Rome in, and they've moved their Trojan horse in, and they have bided their time, and now they're ready to come out. That's what's happening in this country today. It says, if this proposition seems preposterous, I cite again the instructions given to the Jesuits in his initiation to a position of command. Quote, you have been taught to take sides with the combatants and to act secretly in concert with your brother Jesuit who might be engaged on the other side, but openly opposed to that which you might be connected, only that the church might be the gainer in the end. The end justifies the means. So here we have Roman Catholics fighting side by side with Protestants. We've got a breakdown of the barrier of resentment and hatred and suspicion for Catholics in this country. The Catholics are fighting for the Pope. The Protestants are fighting against the intolerable acts, and Rome is winning hand over fist. The Jesuits have accomplished their aim, separating the colonies from Britain, empowering the Catholics in the colonies, establishing a Jesuit university at Georgetown. We've got the first Roman Catholic bishop, John Carroll, and Charles Carroll. And we're off to the races. Catholicism is free to exist and to be Catholic and to serve the papacy. And that's what they've done, side by side with unsuspecting Protestants. And now the bear trap is ready to snap shut. And there isn't, as a percentage of the population of this country, there isn't a handful of us that understand what's about to take place in this country. I call it Inquisition. Inquisition Update, that's the name of the program, and it's aptly named for what is about to take place right here in what we always thought was Protestant America. The author continues, as a result of the role played by Catholics in the war for independence and by those who went to Canada with the Quebec delegation, respect for Catholics grew, particularly for Charles Carroll and Father John Carroll, the Jesuit priest. So much so that in 1792, when Washington was considering resigning from the presidency, James McHenry of Maryland suggested, and Alexander Hamilton agreed, that Charles Carroll would run as a Federalist candidate for President of the United States. Had President Washington retired at that time, the first Catholic president would have been Charles Carroll. Another fact worthy of note is that soon after Washington's Continental Congress declared its independence from Britain in 1776, a military alliance was formed with Catholic France against Protestant England. Next, Catholic Spain joined in. Why would France and Spain, both Roman Catholic nations, get involved in such a distant war? To ensure the success of the Catholic cause. If the reader still doubts that Rome had a hand in and benefited from the fomenting of the American Revolution, then consider the following report written by Bishop John Carroll himself from a committee of Catholic clergy reporting to Rome in 1790. Quote, In 1776, American independence was declared and a revolution effected not only in political affairs, but also in those related to religion. For while the 13 provinces of North America rejected the yoke of Rome, before this great event, the Catholic faith had penetrated 2 provinces only, Maryland and Pennsylvania. In all, the orders and laws against Catholics were enforced. But by the Declaration of Independence, every difficulty was removed. Every political disqualification was done away. Unquote. So the Revolutionary War put a stop to all the anti-Catholic laws because the Catholics fought side by side with the Protestants, weren't allowed to persecute the Catholics, weren't allowed to suppress Catholicism like they did in Great Britain. You see how Rome's winning in this? It says, thus, in John Carroll's own words, the Revolutionary War was a war relating to religion. That from a Jesuit priest, an admission. Of course, the Catholic Church gave lip service to universal religious toleration, as we read in the book The Ark and the Dove, so eloquently put forth to us by the author escapes me right now. I've got it right here. J. Moss Ives, touting religious toleration. But let me tell you, that religious toleration is only for a time, and that time is up. That time is up in this country. Of course, the Roman Catholic Church gave lip service to universal religious toleration as it served her ends. When she was so weak, it served her ends to accept religious toleration. Rome has never tolerated any other religion. She soaked the earth with the blood of Protestants and Bible believers, Puritans, Waldenses, Albigenses. I've listed them over and over and over again. There is no religious toleration in the Roman Catholic Church. It's all a facade, a temporary concession so that she could survive here in the colonies, so that she might build her strength and eventually do what she has always done. The church militant. It was peace with the Protestants that served Rome's end. At the time, Catholicism was the religion not tolerated in this country. It had to concede to survive. But the church's real agenda is found in the letter of February 27, 1785, from Jesuit priest John Carroll to Cardinal Leonardo Antonelli, quote, that the most flourishing portion of the church, with great comfort to the Holy See, to the papacy, may one day be found here, unquote. That the most flourishing portion of the Roman Catholic Church, with great comfort to the Holy See, may one day be found here. That day is here. This is where Roman Catholicism flourishes unhindered in the world. It says, in this opinion, he was joined by Father Charles Plowden, who gave the sermon at Carroll's consecration in August the 15th, 1790, quote, although this great event may appear to us to have been the sport of human passion, yet the earliest and most precious fruit of it has been the extension of the kingdom of Christ, which means Roman Catholicism, the propagation of the Catholic religion, which hitherto fettered by restraining laws that were so predominant in the Protestant colonies, is now enlarged from bondage and is left at liberty to exert the full energy of divine truth. And what is divine truth to a Roman Catholic? The Pope is the vicar of Christ. He has the right to rule this world in Christ's stead. And that's what they have achieved through their control of this so-called Protestant constitutional republic. They've used the military of this country to subject all the other nations of the world to Rome's authority. Revelation chapter 13 fulfilled in history. It's the United States that creates an image to the beast. Roman Catholicism. When this country looked Protestant in the beginning, had two horns like a lamb, it soon began to speak like a dragon. And now it is the dragon. And it's the dragon who gives Rome her power and seat and great authority in the world. We are living in the most powerful Catholic country in the world. And we've literally brought the entire world to their knees to the papacy. It said, let there be no mistake, the American War of Independence was double victory for Catholicism. First over Britain, having used the light cavalry of the Pope, the Jesuits, and the Freemasons to encourage the Crown to pass those intolerable acts. And secondly, over the psyche of the American people. Thus did the Papists and the Jesuits play their role in the American War for Independence. That the Jesuits and their French Illuminists were the instigators behind the American War of Independence was hinted at by the President George Washington himself. In response to a letter from Jesuit Bishop Carroll congratulating the President on his election, Washington wrote back in March 12, 1790, saying, quote, to the Roman Catholics of the United States, your fellow citizens, non-Roman Catholics, that's Protestants, will not forget the patriotic part which you took in the accomplishment of their revolution and the establishment of their government, or the assistance received from a nation in which the Roman Catholic faith is professed. That from the French Jacobins or the Illuminati. We observe also, by the following revelations, which are clipped in small print from the Denver Register on May 11th, 1952. That paper ran the following article suggesting that Washington converted to Catholicism before he died. Quote, a picture of the Blessed Virgin Mary and one of St. John were among the effects found in an inventory of the articles at Mount Vernon at the death of George Washington. The Reverend W.C. Rapetti, S.J., a Jesuit priest, archivist at Georgetown University, a Jesuit university, reports he has discovered this information in an appendix to a biography of Washington. It says the book is a life of George Washington by Edward Everett, published by Sheldon and Company in New York in 1860. Quote, the fact that he had a picture of the Blessed Virgin is rather unexpected, and to the best of my knowledge has not been brought out, says Father Rapetti. The long report among slaves of Mount Vernon as to Washington's deathbed conversion would be odd unless based on truth. It is part of the tradition that weeping and wailing occurred in the quarters that Massa Washington had been snared by the Scarlet Woman of Rome. His Negro slaves wept because they believed he had converted to Roman Catholicism. Why would the blacks weep over that conversion? Because Roman Catholicism enslaved the blacks, and they knew it. The Jesuit priests and their black slave trade ships brought them here. And when their massa converted to Roman Catholicism, it grieved their spirits. And it says, Father Neil, finishing the quote, Father Neil was rowed, the Jesuit priest was rowed across the Piscataway by Negro oarsmen and men often talk freely when slaves are nearby, confidently ignoring their presence. So all of this was spoken in the presence of the slaves. They knew. They knew that they were slaves of Rome, and they had been slaves of a man they thought was Protestant, only to discover that he was secretly Catholic, or at least converted to Catholicism on his deathbed. So said the Jesuit priest who was rowed by them across the Piscataway River. That's it for today. The contemplation that even our first president may have been Roman Catholic. Stunning for me. I'll see you tomorrow on Inquisition Update. Stay tuned for Nicholas Arthur's Cross the Border.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on satellite, internet, or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the Scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.